I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's session, hosted by Astrix, featuring Uncountable. Today's topic is from lab to launch, maximizing the business value of product lifecycle development platform. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John Moran at Astrix, and he's going to kick the presentation off and get things going.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So John Moran, I'm our Chief Commercial Officer at Astrix. I've been in the life sciences industry, both in a consulting as well as in a internal or in an industry role for over 30 years. All of that time has really been focused on digital transformation, data transformation, even in my early days. Spent time across all the business areas. And now focused within Astrix, really focused on the sciences side of the business. So we spend a lot of time in the R&D, the quality and manufacturing space, as well as the clinical and regulatory space. So Noel, if I could ask you to go to the next slide, I'll just introduce Astrix a bit. All right, so just a little bit about Astrix for those. Hopefully many of you know us and you've worked with us, but for over 30 years, we've brought scientific experience specifically to the market from a consulting perspective. We are a very niche consulting organization. We pride ourselves on being very, very science focused and technology enabling. So that said, we are an agnostic, technology agnostic company as part of being a consulting group, but part of us being consulting, we're always looking for partners to work with, partners that can help us bring value to clients. And that was the foundation of us and this webinar with Uncountable. Uncountable is an up and coming solution. Noel will talk about them and their history, but we, as one of us, as we continue to explore innovative solutions we can bring to our clients to help them to drive value in this space. Uncountable is one that we continue to see delivering value to our clients. So again, we're agnostics, but we're always looking for different solutions. And again, that is why we have Uncountable in this webinar with us today. Astrix, very, very scientific focused. As you can see, more than 90% of our folks hold scientific degrees, and then we train them in technology. They come from the labs, they understand how the labs work. So when we talk about implementing a solution or enabling a solution in the labs, that's core because they've typically been on the other side and have worked with similar solutions or have had the similar challenges that we see when we're working with our clients in this space. So with that said, Noel, I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself and Uncountable.
Thanks, John. Excited to join you on the webinar today. My name is Noel Hollingsworth. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at Uncountable. My background is on the software side. So I'm the person who comes in with many years of software experience, AI and machine learning experience, especially. Before co-founding this company, we have many members of our team that bring that scientific expertise, along with great partners like Astrix and John. Just to give you a little background on Uncountable, we're about 10 years old now, offices across the world, San Francisco, New York, Munich, London, Singapore. Customers really across a wide span of industries. So from specialty chemicals companies like a Clariant or a Dow, to paints and coatings like a Behr Paint, people in cosmetics and consumer packaged goods like a Beiersdorf, electronics and semiconductors like a Qnity, biopharma like a Merck KGaA. We really help serve enterprise customers looking to do R&D, quality control, product lifecycle management. And really the goal of our system is to bring this all together in the #1 product development platform for your needs. And doing that by combining both the scientific expertise. One of my co-founders features a material science degree from MIT. We have many members of our team with advanced or PhDs in the field, with an amazing software team who's building a world-class software platform for you all. And we'll talk a little bit about the problems you face today and how we can help solve that along with great partners like Astrix. So for today in this webinar, we're going to cover 3 specific topic areas. The first is a business case for an integrated platform, what problems you may face, what a solution might look like. Second is AI as an accelerator, not as a replacement. Obviously, AI is a huge topic area right now. Lots of important work being done, but also lots of hype. So it's very important to understand how it can be used, how it can't be used. And then I'm going to close by talking about the value of an experienced implementation partner like Astrix. So we'll kick things off with the business case for an integrated platform. So I think everyone knows right now you're facing a lot of challenges in your R&D work. No matter what industry you're in, you need to innovate faster. You need to deal with more global competition. You need to deal with challenging regulatory complexity that differs between EU, US, and Asia. You have desire to get ahead of that and have sustainability concerns you have to deal with and get ahead of new supply chain problems. And to top it all off, if you're a larger company, you're probably the product of many different acquisitions. There's data silos, there's different teams that don't work together well. And you have to go and solve all those problems despite having that in place. And you're doing this with complex consumer and market demands. And what everyone sees is AI is becoming this new and important thing. One example we brought here is the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2024 was awarded for the use of AI and protein folding model, but certainly we don't need to rehash about how companies like OpenAI and Anthropic are bringing AI to the forefront and making something that probably your board and C-suite is bringing to you. Now, what we would argue stands in the way of using AI is decentralized, unstructured, and fragmented data. You have many different phases of product development, from project planning to R&D to scale up, all the way up to quality control. And across that, you're probably using 20 plus different software systems. You have Excel, you have paper notebooks, you have Jump, you have Minitab, you have SAP, you have a regulatory system. And each of these systems might make sense at an individual moment in time and might help you solve the specific problem you're thinking about then. But they're very difficult to join together. It's very difficult to have a holistic understanding of what actually happens. When you're doing market research, are you able to tie that to something that happens 3 layers down? If I'm doing formulation work, do I know that this formulation is going to lead to more problems when we go and produce it at scale? If we're on these different isolated systems, that's usually a very hard question to answer, and a question that frankly doesn't get asked because it's impossible to think of how you would start to answer it. And so what we would argue helps to solve that problem is creating a unified data layer. So we think of this from our perspective as, you have R&D systems, and that's traditionally thought of as ELN and LIMS, also a formulation tool. You have PLM for managing the different products that you have and the approval processes for that, and quality control. And really, these shouldn't be thought of as all being separate and disjoint from each other and just being passed over after the fact, but can we bring them together via some sort of centralized data layer, some database that helps you pull in all that information? So when we have an ingredient in our R&D toolkit, it looks the same as it does in our PLM, it looks the same as it does in QC. So changes in one are reflected in the other. And from there, we get the things that we want. And sometimes that's actions, like proprietary AI and machine learning, that's being able to go and understand how this experiment will perform using a machine learning framework. And hopefully in the end, that's getting better innovation, more productivity, and reducing the risk of both your new product development as well as your existing products in market. John,
Noel,
what are you all seeing?
One of the things I'd add in just from when clients approach Astrix is the first thing we're typically looking at is defining those business outcomes. What are you trying to achieve, right? And then the next key piece for us and what we work with our clients is really trying to define what are the data sets that are tied to that, and then that leads to the system piece, right? The challenge is if you start with the bottom up and try to change the bottom up, at least what we've seen with our clients is if you make those decisions too quickly and don't understand the outcomes you're trying to achieve, you can potentially box yourself in. So I just wanted to add that point in, Noel, from how we see our clients approach this from a business perspective.
And we totally agree with that.
So this ties into this, right? From us and how our clients engage us, it all starts with data, right? Our clients are trying to aggregate and analyze more data globally across different sites, across different teams, to advance their ability to do analytics and insights and metrics differently, ultimately trying to drive to the ability to leverage AI at a next level. But as we do that and we engage with our clients, we realize, as Noel said earlier, there's multiple sources of data. They don't sit in one system. They sit across multiple platforms. They might sit in the same platform, but those platforms and how the data is collected and how those platforms are configured globally is different. So the data consistency is not good across the board. The collaboration with external partners is heavily impacted by security of specific documents and how we can engage them and understand some of that data. So there's a lot of challenges, right? Make no mistake, we always see that some type of a system rationalization is part of the equation. But looking at the data component of this for us is typically where we start with our clients and how our clients are engaging us, which is we want to be able to do more with our data. And at the end of the day, and why we work with Uncountable is because at the end of the day, part of that will come down to a systems rationalization. It has to be part of the equation. Now, it's not the only part of the equation, and certainly we don't necessarily always see as the first part. But again, that's why we say it all starts with data and what you want to be able to achieve with data, and defining what that business case is and those outcomes desired are up front is key to success. Give it back to you. So, we've included some case studies in here, and I'm not going to drain these in details, but what I really want to call out is how we really approach this with clients. So this was an R&D to manufacturing formulation data harmonization that we did with a client, and it was a top 5 client in consumer health. And ultimately, they were trying to do exactly what I said, which was rationalize and harmonize their formulation data across multiple global sites, to be able to do more of the analytics, more of the metrics, and then ultimately get to AI, right? So the objectives improve the data, and for data science as well as for data science and AI, standardize that formulation, experimental, and raw materials data models. Again, right? It's not just the fact that they had multiple systems, but same systems with different data models, and then unify the information across the R&D lifecycle, right? But again, how we start with this was, those are the objectives. There's challenges that we encountered as it relates to that. Some of that was access to data. Some of that was understanding that data exists. Some of that was the consistency of data across sites. But if you look at the end, what we were able to achieve was organizational alignment and data visibility and IT landscape simplification. And that really was where the ultimate systems rationalization came into play. At this client, we had 20 plus types of technologies being used to manage data. All data models were different. But I don't want to lose track of that's one part of the equation. And that organizational alignment around capturing data, the structure around data was a key piece of this as well. We're going to share these materials so you can go into these case studies in more detail. But again, I think it speaks to that. We start with data and then understand how that can get to that IT landscape simplification. We can go forward.
And taking that from a software perspective, one customer we want to highlight was a global specialty chemicals company. They had different R&D systems, different QC systems, and they went and they did an RFP looking for, can we harmonize this together? To John's point, the more you can harmonize, the more you can simplify, shrink down the space of management and how different people have to work, the easier it is and the more benefits you're going to achieve. We worked with them, got 1,000 active users across 5 different QC labs already over the course of this year, tracking over 300 batches a day. This involves connections with SAP, connections with instruments, bringing together these different workflows and bringing together different analysis that was being done in other tools. So things like SPC and control charts now being done instantly in one platform gives everyone a shared language and terminology in which they can operate. A quote from this team is, partnering with Uncountable for our LIMS and ELN solutions has significantly enhanced the efficiency of the client's QC data management workflows, while also offering us to capture more detailed digital records. And our vision of consolidating R&D and manufacturing data onto a single platform, providing real-time insights and paving the way for future modeling, is quickly becoming a reality. So that's really what we're trying to say is, let's not make this a 1-week process to analyze your data. Let's not make it something where you have to go have a special data science team to come in and work and do AI on top of what you already have. Let's democratize it. Let's give it to access to everyone in real time, find issues quicker, debug those issues, troubleshoot, and make root cause fixes much more capably than you could before, with the combination of process enabled by great firms like Astrix and the software enabled by us.
Yeah, and the one thing you hit on in your client example, Noel, was the instrument integration. Like that is a big piece of the data challenge, right? With a lot of these older systems that we see our clients working with, instruments aren't integrated. The access to the data on instruments is a more difficult challenge. It's not as much of a real-time opportunity versus it's a batch or a export opportunity, which makes the data management, the data ability to use the data more challenging. In almost all cases, we're engaging with clients around these new systems and et cetera. They're always looking for advancing their data, their equipment integration. A huge opportunity and huge upside from an access to data perspective in these types of transformations.
100%. What we often see is instruments tied to machine or the vendor specific formats, files, and the more you're integrating that with everything else and tying it into both other instrument files as well as what the inputs look like to that, especially, the more benefit you're going to get beyond just this was the test result that day.
Yeah. It's often that, to that point, it's often that we help clients get, as much as 40-50% more data into the modeling just based on some of that instrument integration.
So we wanted to move on to the second section of the presentation now, talking about AI specifically and how it can be used as an accelerator, not as a replacement. I just want to start by talking about some ways in which Uncountable has seen AI enable benefits from ingredient R&D, looking at things like, can we analyze studies? Can we use really the benefits of these large language models, which are really good at text analysis, to accelerate literature review? Can we do better DOEs? Can we move on from a traditional factorial DOE where it's going to take 8 runs to test 3 variables to something much more intelligent? Can we then use it for product development, suggest new formulations? I think that's what everyone wants to do in product development is, I have some goal at some spec from a customer, from what our long-term research goals are. Can AI help me understand where to test, where not to test? Can it help give predictions of this is an interesting idea, but maybe it's going to fail for a reason we haven't thought about? And then things like portfolio optimization. Can we rationalize our products if we're selling hundreds of thousands of different coatings? Can we go find which ones are making an impact, which ones are not? And then lastly, extending that to manufacturing and supply chain. So looking at things like waste reduction via process control, helping understand when items are going to drift out of spec, help you quickly bring up different alternate suppliers. That's been a common theme over the last 5 years of supply chain disruptions. And how do we quickly react to that? Can we use AI to help that? And the answer is often that you can, because you can more quickly understand what data flows into the process and the sort of results that you're looking for. John, what are you all seeing in terms of what AI can enable?
Well, yeah, I mean, so we're seeing a lot of stuff as it relates to how our clients want to use it and what we're really trying to do. And we're trying to charge towards AI and how we use it with our clients as well. I think the one thing we're sensitive is the space that we're in, especially when we're in the life sciences space, and the compliance and the regulatory components of this, right? So, reviewing manufacturing quality control records. It's great to give you an accelerator towards that, but at the end of the day, it's quite often that you need somebody to actually sign off, right? We're make sure the science and the record itself, right, would pass compliance, et cetera. So, ultimately, if you look at these things, assessment of critical steps and controls, review of change controls, review of quality risk management activities, review of validation activities, across the board, all of these things are, again, we see it as an accelerator. Can it help us give a position? Can it help us assess across multiple records, across multiple sites and records at those sites? I think the answer is yes. But ultimately, the one thing that we're very, very sensitive is it can't necessarily do or sign off on whatever the outcomes and whatever the results it finds are. So we're working with our clients around leveraging AI in the process, but realizing that the process still has some significant dependencies on actual people reviewing and signing off on the potential findings from what AI comes up with. And that's a critical step. And I will say, there's one area specifically, it's not called out here, but we also see clients using it. We got to work with a couple of clients that are using it for method rationalization. And, initially the thought was, and some of the approach they took was trying to use it to completely rationalize methods across global sites. And what we found was ultimately the outcomes were not necessarily acceptable across the sites. So AI was rationalizing some things that potentially were not necessarily the same, even though it appeared to be the same, but because of product deltas, manufacturing deltas at different sites, that it had to be reworked. So the critical component of this was looking at, in this case, AI could get us 60% of the way, but we didn't want to push it any further, because if we pushed it any further, there was risk to that. And also, regardless, there then would be rework. And the rework we found was actually more intensive than just stopping at looking at AI as a 60% solution. So I think for us, Noel, we're trying to figure out how much can we use it? How much of the problem can it solve as it is today? And then where do we need to bridge the gap still with manual efforts or with resource efforts? That's how I'd summarize it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of understanding where you want to use it fully, where you want to use it as a starting point, and where it doesn't make sense, are all important things that a good partner will help you work through.
Exactly. So we wanted to just introduce, we've been talking a lot about terminology. I don't, my guess is a lot of folks are very familiar with these terms. I'm not going to go through them. They'll be part of the handout, but this is the terminology we're dealing with every day when we're engaging clients around these transformational programs, right? It's driving towards AI. It's, natural language processing. There's just all these pieces, machine learning. We see that more and more. So I just wanted to share some of the terminology. Make no mistake, all of these terms are in some shape or form part of every digital transformation engagement that we're doing with clients today. So they're charging towards some of this. Now, the key is most cases, this is a journey to get there, right? Based on where we're seeing a lot of our clients today, where they are from a systems perspective, where they are from a data perspective. It's not, we're going to implement something and you're going to be able to automatically do AI, right? Not out of the gate. But I will tell you, some of the advances we're making with systems like Uncountable, with integration of instruments, et cetera, is helping us move a lot faster than we had expected probably 2 to 3 years ago. Okay, we can move forward.
And the big term we see people asking about, how do these LLMs compare to traditional machine learning? And the way we think about these is these are complementary technologies. Machine learning, Bayesian optimization has been around a while. It's this idea of you have some set of experiments and you want to do predictions on the results, or you want to suggest new formulations to go to next. This is something many different R&D teams are interested in. It's often the holy grail of, this is what we're doing all this work for, is can we go and suggest what to go run in the lab? Can we have a scientist look at it, check it off, and then actually go run it? And obviously LLMs are where all the hype is right now, and justifiably so. It's an amazing new technology that we couldn't have imagined 10 years ago. And really the way to think about this is just they're two different things, and an LLM harness can help make use of the traditional machine learning. But the machine learning is better at the small data, and large language models are better at large amounts, especially of text and other formatted data. And with the desire to use AI, we often see customers saying, let's just do AI. Let's not worry about other systems. I see big ROI stories from the media. Let's just come in and do AI today. And we see a few different problems with doing that before you've built up that sufficient data system. The first is just the volume of data that you have. And the way we put that is a small data set with the best AI model in the world is worse than both expert scientists, which is your status quo, as well as simpler AI models applied to big data. All of these models that are making so much news today are built on we scan the entire internet for every single piece of text we can find. You don't have that level of data, so it makes a big difference to go from 100 data points to 1,000 data points. So the more you can increase the size of your data set, the cleaner you can make it, the better you're going to get. The second we see, I think this goes back to John's point about applying AI and then realizing, okay, this is actually wasting our time, is, there's a desire to use AI and you tend to end up squeezing it into places where it shouldn't be used. So let's go apply AI to this one place of, we don't know it's a fit, but let's go try it. And what that ends up happening is scientists lose trust. If you do something that wastes scientists' time with AI, scientists can often be quite skeptical. If they see it not making impact, then they won't use it later for a project where it would have a real impact because now they don't trust it. They don't believe the motives coming from you all. And so maintaining that trust is important, and understanding sufficient data is important for AI, but it's not the only thing. There's many cases where sufficient data is not enough and you need some other element, some concrete goal you're optimizing for, some predictability in the space. And those are also important things to look at to make sure we're applying AI where it's a fit and we're not applying it where it's not a fit. And John can talk a little about where to
Yeah.
start and how you go from there.
Well, yeah, there's one point that you hit on, Noel, that's spot on, right? We had one client that was doing the method rationalization I had mentioned, right? A different client, and that trust component, right? They tried to use it as the we can do everything, we can just satisfy this rationalization with this, and they completely lost trust of their lab managers because the outcome or the output from it was something that was unacceptable and was, caused them rework, caused them, et cetera. So again, I think that purposeful use can't be stressed enough. And that's that's how we really truly engage our clients around that. So where to start, right? So again, like the goal for me isn't perfection, it's progress and prioritization. I'll talk a little bit later around, roadmaps that we have built as a methodology around how we engage our clients to plan or successfully plan an engagement around this type of a transformation to get to an AI enabled environment. But common starting point challenges is you select a tool before the problem is clear. I mentioned that earlier. The goal is vague. The team is unsure of what's realistic, and how to define a plan and a timeline to achieve this success based on not understanding all the challenges that exist potentially in your environment across the globe. So, I think the key for us is be clear on the goal and the plan, not just we need AI. And that's back to Noel's point, which is purposeful use, right? Define clear business objectives and value-based outcomes, right? Make sure that those outcomes are achievable with AI within your business. Where does the data come from and how clean is it, right? That's critical. And making sure, again, back to one of Noel's point, making sure you have the right data and the data is going to support what the AI objectives are. And then, which group, processes, document types should be prioritized and why, right? At some points in time, we start with our folks that want to rationalize and harmonize all their data, and the 100% achievement becomes not only a challenge, it becomes something that makes the project and the timeline, not viable, because the process and the ability to do that within budgets, within time to value just don't make sense. So we see a lot of folks that just say at some point in time there are certain data elements or data pieces that we're okay with it not being in the AI data model because the value to the cost just isn't there. But I think these things are important. But that initial statement around, if you strive towards perfection out of the gate versus progress and prioritization, it's a recipe that we've seen that it's led to failure, unfortunately. You set the expectations too high, too early, and people lose trust in what outcomes you're getting to in a timely manner. Okay.
Thanks, John. We wanted to dive in here onto specific challenges that we see and what this really looks like, both from a data collection perspective as well as a process perspective on how you're running your organization. So one example we just use as a concrete one is what should structured data look like? So as you're thinking about collecting this data today, if you're collecting in spreadsheets and notebooks, it often, something like a Brookfield viscosity might get collected as viscosity 7D. It might get collected as Brookfield Visc SP number 4. It might be collected as BVON. And really, when we feed it to an AI model, we want as much detail as possible. Because things like what is the aging time, what is the aging temperature, what is the RPM, what is the test temperature, these things all have an impact. And if I'm doing work in Germany, John's doing work in the States, someone else is doing work in Japan, if we differ on those dimensions and we don't record it down, suddenly we've lost context and it's hard to understand across the organization. And we're reconciling the methods and pretending they're the same when they're actually not. And LLMs can help with things like this. They'll understand SP number 4 means spindle number 4. What they won't do is they won't understand that 23C was the testing temperature in America, but it was 20C in Germany. And that has a subtle but important impact on everything that you're doing. But really, beyond data issues, I would argue that process problems are the bigger problem. And that's why a partner like an Astrix working with Uncountable is the more important thing to fix. And there's 3 different types of process problems we quite often see that I want to talk through. The first is what I call like an academic versus industrial mindset. So when you're doing research work, there's often 2 different ways to think about it. One is this academic mindset, and I'm just using this as a colloquial term, but basically saying, massive changes are the only thing that matters. We have a superstar scientist model, so we're going to go let John or Jane do whatever they want because they've made a huge impact, and so they should get freedom to pick whatever their tool they want to use is. And the enterprise model is, a 5 to 20% improvement on existing experiments may be valuable. Many of you are in industries where if you could reduce cost by 5%, it would make your year. And scientists are still important, no doubt about it, but there's emphasis on infrastructure and team rather than a single person, and you're okay mandating what scientists will use as a tool. I promise you, if you have 100 scientists, they're not all going to want to use the same tool. But as an organization, it may be the right thing for them all to use the same tool. And what we're not trying to say is that across the board, one of these 2 approaches is better. What we are trying to say is the enterprise model is a better fit for AI because it leads you to collecting well-structured data, it leads to collecting harmonized data, and it basically enables the AI, which is going to be another member of your organization, to understand what's going on. Second challenge we see is data model coming last. So what we often see are many point systems that often work well for their area of expertise. So I think this is the challenge John was alluding to earlier. Astrix gets brought in after a company has bought 7 different systems, one for QC, one for R&D, one for a certain type of equipment. And they're told, okay, go and make magic happen. And that's really tough to do, right? What often happens is you go throw that data into a data lake, and the data model of the systems is whatever's imposed by the systems. And a QC system might have a great data model for QC, an R&D system might have a great data model for R&D. What they probably don't have is a great data model for joining it together. And the quote we use here from Peter Norvig. Oh, go ahead, John.
Sorry, yeah, that's spot on. I mean, we say with a lot of we end up with silos, right? We end up with silos. To your point, like we've looked at, like, well, this is where we want this data, this is where we want this data, but not how do we bring all the data together. So I just wanted to hit on that point, Noel. That's spot on with this. Multiple systems may be needed, but figure out how the data is going to come together across all those in advance. Just a critical point I wanted to add in there.
And we see even it goes beyond that sometimes. It's silos so much that different parts of the org never even see them, right? You have lab notebooks not ingest into a data lake. You have LIMS systems that capture results but miss scientific context of what was accomplished. Very common for us to be handed, here's a bunch of equipment sensor data. It's not tied to anything, but go make AI magic happen with it. You can't make AI magic happen with that. And so as we think about what solutions for these problems look like, there's a few different ones that we recommend. And this is regardless of your approach. If you're working with Uncountable, if you're working with Astrix, if you're not working with us, we recommend all of these. The first is accept that not all use cases will find a system. I think this is something John's harped on. We want to continue to emphasize. It is better to do 80% really well, get trust that AI is a big value add, than to say every single thing in the org must be 100% captured or it's a failure, and to have those remaining 10% of this is our amazing scientist who brings a lot of value to the org really mad and really angry. Place that data model first. Align it to a data model you're creating in-house or with a partner like an Astrix, and make that a scientific model of what happens in experiment. It should not be, this is the default table layout in our data warehouse. It should not be, these are the two vendors' data model, and therefore it is whatever hodgepodge of that fits together the best. And again, 80% of data captured, joined, and harmonized to that model is going to do a better job connecting team to team rather than 100% but completely disconnected. And then change management is really the most important piece. It's the reason many projects in this area fail. We could give a 45-minute talk together, I'm sure, on what change management should look like. That's not a focus today, but 100% pay attention to that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's the piece that we often see cut out in the planning stages as much as we stress the importance. And then, I've have too many examples where we've had to pull it back in, and then there's so much remediation that the cost is more than if we had done it from planning it up front. I mean, for me, change management is one of the first things you have engaged as you're starting to plan these initiatives. So it starts in the beginning and it goes throughout. It's not something you do once and it's done. There's different value drivers that it will trigger at each phase of these engagements.
100%. And as you think about how you're going to be ready for AI, there's really three key takeaways, and these are from Peter Norvig, who's a research director at Google. First is data drives progress. The more data you have, the cleaner the data is, the better the results are going to be from your AI. If anyone is pitching you on, we have a magic algorithm for AI, they're lying to you. I can promise you that. And quality matters most. Better data beats more data beats better algorithms. And with the volume of data that you have, simple models are often best. If I'm OpenAI and I have access to the entire internet, I can make a really complex model and it won't overfit. If you have 100 data points, you can't make that complex a model. Use best-in-class models, but don't try to get too tricky with it. And so what this means is you should prioritize data collection, focus on gathering high-quality, diverse sets of data, emphasize that the data has high quality, and make sure you match your models to the data. As we think about what your org's maturity model looks like, there's this graph that we've built. Thankfully, most companies are beyond the document data via pen and paper stage, no longer having paper notebooks filed away in filing cabinets. But truthfully, most orgs will have large parts of the organization that are still collecting data digitally via Excel or Word documents. You might have an ELM where you upload data to from an Excel sheet. You might have different parts that are automated, but collecting data digitally is definitely the starting point for many orgs when we start to work with them. From there, it goes to centralizing the data, again, in some sort of SharePoint where now you can search it. But really, to enable AI, what you need is organization-wide structured data. You need that data joined together. You need it to be semantically labeled appropriately and not just scientist one does things one way, scientist two does things another way. And this leads into being able to use it for the AI models, do the things that we want to do. And eventually it's just the AI is a companion. We're working with the AI on a day-to-day basis. It's part of what we do for all the places where it's a fit, and we know where it's a fit, and we know where it's not a fit. So concretely, what this looks like is your good data should be actionable data. You should be able to search, filter, track experiments across your different projects. You should be able to seamlessly capture interconnected data at every stage, every step of your lab's process. And all this should be leverageable into graphs, into AI and machine learning models. You should be able to pull up and understand these are the 27 experiments run in a different lab halfway across the world that match specific criteria. Let me go and plug that into a model. Let me take out outliers. All that should be a 5-minute process for you. And what that enables is for you to make data-driven decisions. And the end goals that we all want. Can we respond to customers quicker? Can we develop new products quicker? Can we understand this is a dead end and stop our work on that, rather than going down a rabbit hole for 6 months?
Yeah,
And
Noel, you
what
hit
else?
on it earlier, right? Defining the when you're going through and defining what data you want to harmonize and what data you want to bring into the AI data model, like prioritizing on what you need to be actionable, what you need to get to your outcomes, like that is one of the most critical things, right? Because if your goal is just 100% because you want 100% versus 80% because 80% is what you need to drive to your outcomes, it will challenge your success. I can't stress that enough. And we've seen more clients set that 100% goal and then back it down to 85 or 80% or whatever the right number is. But the cost of not doing that up front is significant.
And once we have this AI data, the great thing about the past couple of years innovation in LLMs is now we can make it much more accessible to an average scientist. We're now able to use things like text-based filtering, text-based searching to quickly understand quickly make a graph in a way that doesn't require months of scientist training, quickly pull up visualizations, quickly create a machine learning model, all via interfacing with it the same way we'd interface with a human. So I want to pass back to John to go through a real life case study of what this has looked like.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I'd note with this case studies, and I've brought up a lot of examples of lessons learned and findings we've had, right? So I want to be clear, it's not being critical of some of the way that our clients have approached things, right? I think that we've all been learning and evolving what we've learned as we've approached this topic and approached getting to what we would call quote unquote success related to this. But I think the key is we want to learn from those lessons. And one of the things Astrix is trying to always help our clients do is learn from other places where we've seen people take a different approach and then evolve that approach, right? So in this case, this was a LIMS implementation for a DNA testing laboratory, right? The project approach, and again, first and foremost, and this really ties back into that change management, was making sure the management was aligned in the vision, priorities, and the roadmap. Like, what does success look like, right? And because this was a complex across multiple sites, across global sites and functions, and making sure that there was alignment on that was critical, right? Because that wasn't necessarily the case in how the program was introduced to us. I'm not going to go on, for sake of time, I'm not going to go into like our details on our solution. We'll give this as a takeaway, but the thing that we were able to deliver is a fully defined set of requirements and selected solutions as it relates to LIMS, QC LIMS, and EM LIMS for this client for manufacturing and execution systems, and that was across multiple product areas, right? So again, that started with getting all of management aligned up front, making sure we understand the visions, everybody's on board with it. And then the outcome we achieved is being able to fully define the specific requirements for those types of systems. One doesn't happen without the other. That's the only thing I'll call out in this case. And it ties back into that change management that Noel mentioned earlier. Again, we'll share these materials with you as an outcome. So framework for success, I mentioned earlier, right? And this is key. I mentioned these blueprints, right? So for us, we've built these blueprints, right? Again, based on these lessons learned. And fortunately, unfortunately, there's always a lot of lessons learned. But what we tried to do is we tried to capture where we've seen fall downs, where we've seen wasted efforts, where we've seen projects hit resistance. And then as well as, understanding surprises that you find based on certain situations that we have in certain engagements we've had with clients, whether they be global situations, they be multiple business units, different types of teams, different types of data. But these blueprints really then, structure, how do we do an assessment? Like, how do we really get to a point where we are now? We often join clients in this journey at different stages, understanding where they are in a stage and how they got there and why they're engaging us at that point in time. is critical for how we're able to help them. Use case prioritization, what matters most, what's the goal, right? Again, trying to achieve 100% day one versus prioritization and progress, not the recipe we've seen that leads to the best success. Tool fit check, right? So if we pick tools, are those tools going to really satisfy the outcomes? Will it work with, what you want to achieve from your data? And then, the last two are really what I consider to be critical, what we suggest is critical starting points or critical parts of the starting point. It's always good to do a proof of concept. It's one of the things we really do. We typically try, as much as we like to generate and go into clients with on the big journey and structure that big journey up front. Astrix mindset is much more, let's do a proof of concept. Make sure that we're working with you. What we're trying to do is going to achieve the outcomes you want to achieve, and that how we do the proof of concept leads to how we'll scale. And then that change support, as I said, understanding up front, what are some of the challenges you're going to hit? What are some of the surprises that you might hit, some of the resistance you might hit? That's critical as well. But again, this is a methodology we've built. We've got templates based on different technologies, on different approaches to this, whether it be digital and data first, or it be one specific data set you're trying to resolve. These blueprints, we've got more than 50 blueprints we've built for different types of ways that clients engage us around different pieces of these transformations.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a
we
good
go forward to
segue.
take time. I'm watching time here, Noel, as well.
Yeah, that's a good segue into, we can finish by talking about the value of having an experienced implementation partner like an Astrix as you're on this journey.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go into this. And again, sake of time, I want to be able to support questions. But again, this is something else we've built, right? Which is understanding like upfront. And notice I call it your lab of the future. Not everybody's lab of the future is the same. We've learned that people have different priorities. People have different scenarios on what they're trying to achieve. But that said, understanding the strategic direction, and we assess what your strategic direction should be based on what your outcomes for your lab of the future should be. And this is just a framework of the different steps that we go through as it relates to helping you achieve that. Typically, we can do these programs in anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, typically, depending on size and scale. Some can go a little bit longer, depending on number of global sites, et cetera. But, and again, some can be shorter, depending on what the size and scale of your initiative and engagement is. But we'll share this as an outcome of a framework that we've built. And I'll ask Noel for you to go to the next slide. Again, for sake of time and being able to get the questions.
Yeah, and we'll go quickly through these. These are all available in the slides you'll have access to. But just again, talking through what an engagement would look like. In this case, AI-enabled shelf life analysis for production trials, taking stability data sets, putting that into the data platform, combining that with inputs, understanding now how that leads to degradation, comparing that at scale, all through a change management protocol like we've talked about. And expanding the scope over time, originally looking at plant and pilot shelf life studies, then looking at upstream data, then capturing all of the critical data, enabling end-to-end AI-driven decision making. Don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to do every single thing across your entire org at once. Pick off the right things that are going to build momentum, build trust.
So this is another example. I'm going to just say, this was digital laboratory operations and seamless lab integration. I did speak to some of this in some of the examples I was giving earlier. I'm not going to talk through this in detail for sake of time, but it's another good example where, again, what I'd stress here is we start with the business challenge. We then structure a solution that we engage the client around how we would approach it to address that business challenge. And this is always going to be a little bit different depending on what the challenge would be. And then lastly, I would just say in everything that we're engaging with clients, the key results is always going to be tied to whatever we defined up front as the value-based outcomes as the reason to do the project. So I'm not going to read the details of this one for sake of time, but again, I just say that there's these case studies in here to provide examples of ways we're engaging with clients that maybe if you're interested, take a look at when we share the materials. And then, I mentioned sort of from a practice perspective, right? Astrix has a digital and data consulting services. We have a practice area that's specific around this space. So I mentioned we got more and more clients. The way they engage us is data first, system enabling second, right? So we basically looked and said, okay, if we're going to think and work with clients like that, clients are looking at different reasons as to why they engage us around that. Or is it digital innovation? Is it pushing their time to market? Is it cost optimization? Data, becoming a data-driven enterprise? Technology performance, new ways of working. Like those are just samples of why clients engage us on this digital and data transformation journey. And there's examples underneath of how we think of each of those. And then, some of what we do to enable or how we work clients to enable them in these spaces. But for sake of time, this is something you all can read. And if you want to talk about it more with Astrix, please reach out to us as a follow-up. And then I'm just going to hit on this. This is our advisory services. This is really our change management, our program management, really hitting on, and value realization, really hitting on, if you're going to engage in one of these programs, we never want to ignore not only the change management, but the value realization component of that change management. That really helps you fuel or support the ROI and how you advance these initiatives and keep momentum for these initiatives. That sometimes takes some periods of time to accomplish fully. Go forward. And then I want to thank Noel, and I can't stress enough, the Astrix Uncountable partnership is a really good one. It's a strong one. As I mentioned, we have to be agnostics, but we pick our partners very, very carefully. And that's tested on the value that we see that they're able to bring to clients. So for us, right, through the partnership, we help companies, right, connect fragment product development data, improve data integrity, streamline workflows. Like we're thinking of all the things clients are asking us to drive from a value perspective. And then what we do, right, is we introduce our partners that we feel could potentially bring value depending on what technology challenge that you get or have that we get as an outcome. But, we are, and I want to stress, we're a strategic and technical services consulting organization, right? And we're data and science driven. But at the end of the day, that's where we bring our partners in. And Uncountable is, like I said, is a great one as it relates to a technology partner. And make no mistake, we do not only do we work with them and help our clients meet them and engage them if we're engaged first, but we're often then partnering hand in hand with them around the solution when a client chooses Uncountable as the solution or the technology to move forward. So I'll offer that. And Noel, if you have anything to close on the partnership, please do.
Yeah, thanks, John. We feel the same way about Astrix. We're also agnostic and we work with whoever the customer feels is best. But in terms of combining a great expertise, experience in the industry, and then having a global large organization reach, I think Astrix is second to none. They've been a great partner and are great assistants for customers looking for that implementation partner, broader partner that can assist with them with their overall strategy in a way that a software vendor cannot. So I believe we have time for a couple questions. We apologize. I think we ran a little late, but we have 5 minutes remaining.
We do.
A couple content, and we will share the content after the fact.
Yes, and before we take the questions that we have on the floor, I'm going to go ahead and get the recording stopped.